welcome and reintroduce the RAC members. So if I could, let's just do a roll call and go down, and if each of you could unmute, state your name and who you represent. So let's start with, give me just 1 second. Let's start with Austin.
Austin Atkinson, representing public at large.
Bart.
Mark Batista, non-consumptive rep.
Gene.
Gene Boardman, representing public at large.
And I am Braden Richmond. I'm the chair. I represent Sportsman. Chad.
Chad Utley, representing public at large.
Tammy.
Tammy Pearson, elected official from Beaver County.
Dan.
Dan Fletcher, Bureau of Land Management.
And Craig.
Craig Lobb from representing agriculture.
Sean.
Sean Ellie, Fillmore, representing Fish Lake and Dixie National Forest.
And Verland.
Verland King, representing agriculture.
Thank you. Tonight, we're going to excuse Riley Robert and Nick Jorgensen. They both asked if they could be excused. So appreciate everyone being here. Before we start, I want to read a disclosure. We were really hoping that at some point we might get past this Corona thing and be able to do a public meeting with RACs again. But while we're doing the digital meeting, let me read through this. So it says, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, the governor has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling spread of virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, state of Utah, and local health departments since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that the public gathering at Regional Advisory Council and Wildlife Board meetings present a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will continue to conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by recent amendment to the Utah Code and executive order by the Utah Governor Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in the place of the in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics in the future meetings or to observe this meeting may do so by logging on to the division webpage at wildlife.utah.gov/feedback.html, where instructions and links are provided. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. First on the agenda would be the approval of the agenda and the minutes. So if anyone can make a motion to approve those.
This is Craig. I'll make a motion to approve them.
Thanks, Craig. So we have a motion.
I'll second.
And Tammy with a second. We'll do a roll call, and on the roll call, if you could just clearly state yes or no. So, Austin.
Yes.
Sorry, getting the roll call. Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
And Verland.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So the motion passes unanimously. As informational from the last Wildlife Board meeting, it was a fairly quick RAC and board last time. And just as a quick informational, there were 4 action items: the upland game and turkey guidebook and rule recommendations, the migratory upland game recommendations, and SWAN rule amendments, the AIS rule amendments, the walk-in access rule amendments, and the prohibited species variance request. And all of those passed, I believe, all unanimously. So I don't know that I have anything more to add there. Kevin, did you have anything to add?
No, don't have anything to add. You may want to, we do have two board members on with us. If you want to recognize and welcome them, Brady.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Wade and Donnie are on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I guess Wade and Donnie are on, so we want to recognize that the two wildlife board members have joined us. So appreciate Wade and Donnie for being in the meeting. Next on the agenda, we'll get a regional update from Kevin.
If you'll go ahead and mute. All right, everybody. I've got a number of things I'd like to update you on, but I'll try to be efficient. Just from our office staff, we've remained open throughout the pandemic with our front desk. We are requiring masks, and we do have plexiglass set up, and most people are working from home or in the field, but our front desk staff is here and helping customers and doing a great job recently, in addition to the sales days, and been processing a lot of bear bait CORs and landowner permits. Our wildlife section is in the process of getting our deer unit plans updated. There's a questionnaire that will be going out to several hundred hunters in each unit, so that we can gather information. We've had to try to be a little bit creative in gathering input, but we'll probably be able to get broader input than normal with the route that we're taking, because we're asking questions specifically to people that have drawn or that have hunted in each of the individual units within the last 3 years, a series of questions. And then we will vet those through a more local process with phone calls and emails going as we complete those plans. The biologists are in the middle of elk and pronghorn classifications. We have had a few bear incidents. They've been primarily on the Beaver Mountain this year. We have worked on a couple of bears and take care of a couple of issues there. We're hearing that the forest grouse populations are looking good. So far, we had a good hatch, and people should look forward to a good forest grouse hunt this fall. We are monitoring drought conditions. As you all know, we had a fairly good winter, but our monsoon moisture has been non-existent so far, and so we're keeping a close eye on that. We are scheduled for CWD collection on the Pine Valley, Southwest Desert, Penguich Lake, Zion, and Ponsegont units this year. We'd ask the deer hunters contact the office or the local biologist during the archery and muzzleloader season to get their samples taken, and we will have check stations set up during the any weapon hunt. From our conservation species program, some pretty cool things going on there. We signed a 10-year conservation easement with the community of Eskdale to protect a pallid bat maternity colony, which is one of only 2 pallid bat maternity colonies that we know of in the state of Utah. So we'll be able to protect those moving forward. We've also completed the 2nd year of a 3-year pilot study to develop a pinyon jay nesting colony survey protocol. That's a protocol that will be very important for our habitat treatments going forward. Pinyon jays have kind of hit the radar screen as a species that there's some concern about. And so we're making sure that we can keep track of those populations as we continue to do habitat treatments, many of which are reducing pinyon and juniper stands in some cases. We've also been conducting monitoring bat activity within the Bryan Head fire to see what impacts that fire had on our bat populations. And then just a curiosity note, we had some Parowan City employees call us and tell us that they had a flamingo at the Parowan wastewater pond. We thought they were a little crazy, but we had since confirmed that they did in fact have a flamingo. Some of you may remember we had a flamingo that got nicknamed Pink Floyd that hung out on the Great Salt Lake for several years. He's been gone for quite a while, but we have a new flamingo, and who knows where it came from in the state right now. From our aquatic section, they're working as we speak on a treatment on Mammoth Creek to restore native cutthroat trout. Yesterday, they salvaged over 500 native cutthroats. They'll then treat that stream. That started today and tomorrow. They'll be decontaminated and neutralize the chemical by tomorrow night, and they'll put those fish right back in the stream. And so we'll repopulate that stream immediately with cutthroat trout. Just worth noting, we did, without asking, we received a $10,000 donation from one of the adjacent landowners that had where Mammoth Creek flows through his property or adjacent to his property, just because he liked the project. So that was pretty cool. And then just a note for people to be careful. We have had several toxic algae blooms reported in the southern region. Those can be pretty dangerous. So please be aware of your surroundings when you're out around water bodies. The big story in our habitat section is the fires that have been going on. And I'll just run down a list of the major ones. We've had the Canal Fire on the north end of the Oak Creeks. It's the largest, 78,000 acres. There's some good and bad to that fire, both for bighorn sheep. It's good for bighorn sheep in that it created more bighorn sheep habitat. It's bad for bighorn sheep in that it removed some of the barrier that we had of inappropriate habitat between the Oak Creeks and the Gilsons, and there's a fairly large band of domestic sheep that are grazed on the Gilsons, and so we're going to have to be careful to watch how bighorn sheep movements towards the Gilson Mountains and make sure that we're taking care of things there. The Baker Canyon fire on the south end of the Fillmore Valley and the White Sage Flat was approximately 500 acres. We had the Rock Path fire between Milford and Delta that was about 21,000 acres. The Wire Pass fire east of Kanab on 5 Mile Mountain and House Rock Road was about 1,600 acres. The Big Summit fire that's out in Hamlin Valley is about 8,600 acres. We had a fire west of Vail that burned 2,600 acres. The Big Turkey Farm fire that was the north of St. George, that was about 12,000 acres. We're going to be watching that carefully to evaluate the impacts on the Mojave Desert tortoise populations. The Cottonwood Trail fire that near Leeds was just over 1,600 acres. The Pine Hollow fire, which is still active, is down east of Kanab on the House Rock Road. It's currently at about 11,000 acres, and that one is still burning. There's been a handful of other smaller fires between tens of acres to hundreds of acres that may or may not get treatment, just depending on how far the money goes. But all of those others that I listed, we will be actively engaged in the rehab process with the federal agencies and private landowners and wherever those fires affected wildlife habitat. Just as a reminder, there are fire restrictions in place just about everywhere. If you could remind people of that in whatever role you have, that would be helpful. There is a horse gather scheduled out in the Southwest Desert area on the Sulphur HMA. It's scheduled for August 15th through September 1st. That will potentially impact some archery hunters. And so we ask people to be patient with that. Removing some horses is a high priority though, and so it's worth a little bit of disruption there. They will try to remove fires from our Indian Peaks WMA, but they'll try to do that midweek. And just since I know it's a topic that she follows closely, Tammy, is there anything you'd like to add to that on the horse gather?
Just appreciate the gather, appreciate DWR's support and anybody else's support in getting that done. It's been a long time coming. The other one that we're really concerned about is that fire on Frisco. We're pushing for an emergency gather on that Frisco herd. They're scheduled. I think they're scheduled for a deal this winter, if I'm not mistaken, but I hope they can do it earlier. They're going to be out of feed.
Great. Thank you, Tammy.
Yep.
Our outreach section let me know that COVID has not changed the behavior of dedicated hunters. They still have a tendency to wait till the very last minute. And so we're scrambling right now to try to get projects and so that everybody can get their hours in. We have had a staff change there. JC Ballard has replaced Dan Ruggiero, who's headed back to Long Island, where he's from, because his parents needed some help there. Our law enforcement section continues to be really busy with the increased number of people that are just enjoying the outdoors. If you've been out at all, especially on the weekends, there are a lot of people out. And so that's impacting our law enforcement folks. At the same time, they're trying to get ready for the fall hunts. that's all I have for an update, but would be happy to answer any questions that any of the RAC members have. Okay, Braden, if there's no questions, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Tonight, we only have 2 action items and an informational item. So let me just quickly kind of remind the process here. We all should have watched the presentations prior to this meeting. Hopefully everyone had a chance to do that. So what we will do is we will just go straight to questions from the RAC, and then we'll go to comments from the RAC and then entertain motions. I think tonight, just slightly different than what we've done the last couple of times. I think I'm just going to open it up for questions, give everyone a chance, and maybe have a little conversation there. On the comments, we'll probably do a roll call and go around the room. So on the first action item, let's go ahead and dive in. It's on the Furbearer and Bobcat harvest recommendations. And let me open it up to the RAC for questions on that presentation. Oh, sorry, Kevin just reminded me he'll do the summary of the reports that came in, the feedback that came in before we go into the discussion. But any questions on the Bobcat presentation? Boy, it must have been a great presentation. All right, just a second here. We're pulling up the summary of the feedback. Okay, we'll give it to you, Kevin, so you can summarize the feedback, and then we'll go into comments.
Okay, on this particular item, we had close to 80% of people were either supportive or neutral, and then 23% people opposed the proposal. So 38% support, 38% neutral, and 23% of those that responded were opposed. And if I remember right, we had about just right around 25 comments total on all of the come into the RAC for both of these agenda items.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Let's go ahead and open it up for comments. For the comments, I'm going to roll call, and so we'll just go around and make sure if anybody has a comment, we'll discuss whatever you want to discuss. We'll start at the top of the list. Next time we'll go from the bottom up, but let's start at the top this time and start with Austin.
I have no comments on the Bobcat recommendations.
Thanks, Austin. Bart?
I have no comments either.
Gene?
I'm in support of the way it was presented.
Thanks, Gene. Chad?
No comments.
Tammy?
I'm supporting as well. No comment.
Thank you. Dan?
No comments.
Craig?
I'm good with it.
Sean?
No comments.
And Verland?
No comment.
All right, well, this should be fairly straightforward then. With no questions and no comments, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the plan as presented.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve as presented. A second.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Chad. So Tammy made a motion to accept as presented. Chad seconded that motion. And we'll roll call again. If you could just clearly say yes or no. So Austin?
Yes.
Bart?
Yes.
Gene?
Yes.
Chad?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
And Verland?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's move on to the second action item, the Cougar recommendations and rule amendments. And on this, just a little bit of clarification. Hopefully everyone caught it. A lot of the presentation was just discussing what's already been passed. As far as recommendations, we just want to make sure that we stick with the proposals and not try to change what's already been passed. But let's go ahead and open that up for questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have a real quick amendment to the recommendations, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Go ahead.
Let me just, I'll just display this here real quick. I'd just like to make an amendment to the season dates. Can everybody see that? I'll take that.
You're not seeing it, Darren.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No.
I'm not, no.
All right, hold on. I have to push the share button apparently. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Much better.
Everything is slow. All right, here we go, including me. So this just pertains to 3 units, the LaSalle, the San Juan Mountains, and the Book Cliffs East. The original recommendation was to restrict the use of dogs for lion hunting between April 15th and November 2nd. We'd like to add an exception to that recommendation and allow people who have valid bear permits, who would be on that unit anyway, to hunt lions at the same time. So if people have a valid bear permit for any of the following seasons, spring limited entry, fall limited entry, a multi-season permit or a pursuit permit for bears, and a lion permit, they'd be allowed to hunt lions during that time frame. We don't see a lot of lion harvest during that window, but we do see a handful, usually about half a dozen or so. And if people are down there hunting bears with dogs and they want to take a lion, we didn't see any reason to restrict that. So that's the only amendment we're recommending tonight.
Thanks, Darren. Hey, Darren, can you leave that up? I do have a question on, that's the only question I have is exactly what you just brought up.
Okay.
So my understanding is that these units, we're kind of singling them out to have this limited time where they can't pursue. The rest of the state you can pursue on open units.
Right.
And I guess I'm just confused why we'd pull 3 units out and leave the rest of the state open. My understanding it's because of some incidents we had with some guys that got in trouble for multiple things last year. I guess I'm just concerned that we're making this more complicated than it needs to be, and just curious to hear your feedback.
The reason we changed was a little history, I guess. If you remember during the bear recommendations this winter, we made some different recommendations for, in fact, a lot of that RAC was about trying to address some concerns that the land management agencies and our law enforcement section had with crowding. We had a committee together. So we made those changes to bear. And then what law saw this spring during the bear hunt is there were a lot of people afield hunting lions, and it sort of ran counter to what we were trying to do with the bear season. It also made it difficult for law enforcement to kind of sort out who was doing what. And so they asked us if we could put some kind of restriction so that during those bear seasons, that if people were there with dogs, they were hunting bears. So that's where the original recommendation came from. After looking at it a little bit more, we decided, if they're there anyway, let's let them hunt lions too. So those are the things we're trying to address, and it's primarily on the LaSalles, but these other 2 units are pretty popular for people, and they want to take dogs out, and mainly they want to chase bears, but they do have restricted bear seasons, and so if they can go with a lion tag and be on the mountain, they will. And so we want to try to avoid some of that overlap and some of that concern that law enforcement had out there.
So how many incidents, recorded incidents of problems have we had? My understanding is there's 5 incidents that's driving this. I guess I just get concerned that we're passing laws on top of laws for 5 incidents.
I think as far as violations go, I think the numbers are relatively small, but this is more of a general concern that we're getting feedback from our law enforcement personnel on, and land management agencies. It's really it's just a lot of people down there during that time of year. So again, the bear recommendations would try to address this. With lion hunting, honestly, we should have recognized this would be an issue when we did the bear stuff, but we're just trying to correct that in this recommendation.
And sorry for just keep harping on this, but it seems like we resolved attempted to resolve the concern with the bear tags and the bear issue. So now the concern we're having is that guys will go get lion tags, and some of them will use that as an excuse to chase bears. That's really what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to stop a small group of people that are already breaking the law.
No, this is the concern with the bears was the number of non-residents that were coming in because they don't have bear hunting available in their states. And so the bear recommendations, if you recall, didn't limit residents, but it does limit non-residents during that spring pursuit season. And so this has virtually no impact to residents who could buy a bear pursuit permit and be on these units in the spring. There is some limitations in summer. That season's restricted. So it's primarily affecting non-residents in the spring, and that was the concern that was brought to us for the bear stuff.
All right, that's probably good for my questions. Other questions from the RAC?
Yeah, this is Verlin. I've got a question. One of all the input that we had talked about trapping cougars. I was wondering what the law is now. It seems like that'd be a way to eliminate a part of this problem on these high density cougar areas.
We're not recommending general use of traps for lions. But if someone needed to address a specific problem, and for example, we've done it when we've got a cougar that's hitting a sheep herd, for example, or bighorn sheep unit, the director can authorize the use of snares and traps to take lions, but we're not recommending a general use of traps and snares for recreational purposes.
So, we went over that Furbearer real fast. There wouldn't be a way that you could do like the Bobcats, give a couple of line tags to the trappers in certain areas.
We're not recommending that, Verlin. No.
This is Austin. I have a quick question about increasing the bag limit to 2 cougars per, I'll call it a regulatory year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, you could essentially purchase 4 tags, is that correct? You could pick up 2 harvest objective tags or permits that would look different than the spot and stock permits. Is that how it would work?
You can have a combination of 2 permits, Austin. So, for example, this new spot and stock season that the director implemented, you can have one of those permits. But in addition to that, you could have a split permit and a harvest objective permit. But the most you could have is 2, and the most lions you could take would be 2. You could have 2 harvest objective permits. You could have a split permit, and you wouldn't need a second harvest objective permit to take 2 lions. The only one you're really limited on would be the spot and stock, a $30 tag. You could only have one of those, but then some combination of some other permit would be allowable. Does that make sense, or is that just more confusing?
Both.
Okay. You couldn't have 4. I can't figure out a way you could have 4.
Okay.
Just recreationally, you could have 2 permits, one of which might be spot and stock, but you could also buy 2 harvest objective permits and take 2 cougars. If you drew a split unit, you can use that permit during the limited entry portion, but you could also buy a second harvest objective and hunt a different unit. Or you could, once the limited entry portion of the unit ended, that split tag is still good as a harvest objective tag. But you could buy a second harvest objective, for example, and hunt the same unit after the limited entry season ended. So
As long as you did not buy a spot and stock earlier in the year.
right, yeah. So the most you could have would be two permits of some kind, and the most you could take would be 2 during from July through June the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Gene here. Isn't it already in the guidebook that you can take 2 cougars? And what are you proposing that's different from what's already in the guidebook?
Right now, you can only take 2 if you're hunting one of the unlimited. There are 4 units in the state that are classified as unlimited units. You can get a second permit to take a second lion on those units. What we're proposing now is to allow for a second lion to be harvested statewide on any open units. And the reason we're proposing that is we have a lot of units that go that don't fill quota. And on some of these units, so with predator management plans, we want to try to get harvest numbers up so we can address the concerns we have with prey base. And we thought if a person has the equipment, the dogs, and the know-how to take a lion, and they had the opportunity to take a second lion, we might increase harvest and meet some of those quotas and management objectives we're trying to reach.
This is Austin. I have one more quick question. Is the over-the-counter permit costs $30 for a resident and a non-resident?
Yeah, it'd be the same. And that's it's a tag that already exists on the books. And so the director decided to use that permit rather than in order to implement this quickly. And we didn't have a non-resident fee for that permit. So that's how that worked out.
Okay.
Gene again. What kind of impact are you expecting that spot and stock thing to have? How many lions do you think it'll bring in?
Probably going to be minimal, Gene. I did reach out to Idaho, which has kind of a similar. They do allow hunting during their big game seasons, and they see about a 20% incidental harvest. So in other words, someone who's hunting deer or elk and takes a lion. I suspect that's probably higher than what we'll see. We're not going to see a lot of lions taken this way, but it is provided in the statute that we provide a way for big game hunters to take lions while they're afield. So that's why we're doing it.
This is Bart. I have a question about the collars. Have any of the scientific agencies that are using those collars expressed any concerns about these proposals?
So these are all our collars, Bart. Okay. USU, I talked to the grad student. I know she submitted some comments.
I saw those.
I think what we've done in the past is in the guidebook recommend that people don't take collared animals. Obviously, one exception would be for depredation. If we have a lion taking livestock, regardless, we deal with that as we need to. So far, that's worked pretty well, just discouraging people rather than banning it outright. And so that's going to be our recommendation, is just to continue with that strategy. We have had a few taken by sportsmen. Some were involved in livestock depredation earlier in the year and were taken later in the season after the livestock were gone, but definitely were cats that had been into livestock. And we've seen 3 statewide out of 38 odd colored lions. So again, we discourage people from taking colored animals, but we're not going to recommend making it a violation that someone would get ticketed for.
Darren, this is Austin. Just to expound on that, you said it would not be something they could be ticketed for. The way I read it was that you would designate certain units where
Yeah.
it is illegal to take a collared lion, correct?
Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of confusion about. So what we're recommending tonight is to change some language in the rule that would allow the division to do that. So the rule, in order for us to prohibit the take of a collared animal, we would need to put in the guidebook specific units where that would be prohibited. And so if the division doesn't do that, then it would by default not be prohibited. The rule was a little bit unclear. Some of our different people in the agency were interpreting it differently, the way it's currently written. And so we wanted to clarify that. So tonight we're voting on rule language that doesn't really change what the division could do, it just kind of clarifies the process. But we're also not going to be recommending any units this time around to prohibit the take. So this kind of gives us a tool, but we're not looking at using it for this current study.
Would that prohibition by DNR have to go through this RAC process?
Yeah. So we'd recommend it during the process, and yeah, there may be some studies where it would be necessary for us to keep collared lions or other animals on the air. This study doesn't focus on cause-specific mortality as much, so it's more of a concern, I know from the grad students' comments, just in making sure that sample sizes remain high. But it looks like we've been doing all right. So I hate to put a hunter, especially with spot and stock seasons, in a situation where they might accidentally take a collared lion and all of a sudden they're in violation and someone has to write them a ticket. So I'd always prefer people to just, pass if they could, but not put them in jeopardy if they do it on accident, or they need to take it for some other reason.
Yeah, I just remember last year there was a lot of, hate and discontent with setting some of the numbers because they say the data isn't out there on population. Right. If we don't prohibit, then you're affecting the ability to collect data as well.
Yeah, I think if we'd seen more take last, we've got two winters under our belt now, Bart, and we just haven't seen. It's really most of the take has been on one unit, on the cache in particular, and again, some of those cats were involved in depredation, and so they would have been removed anyway. But so that's what we're recommending this time around.
Darren, I have another question, and this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded question. Hopefully I can make it clear.
Okay.
But the question is, so that with the new legislation or rules, you mentioned a second ago that part of that is they want to allow sportsmen to have an opportunity to take cougars while they're field hunting other species. And so that's for the reason for the $30 spot and stock. And so the question I have is, do we have a method where we're getting the word out that that's available, where that's something that is we've been told to do? Do we have a method to get the word out, or is the only method to get the word out in the Cougar proclamation? And my concern there is, so it's kind of maybe even a two-part question. The Cougar proclamation is the most challenging of all proclamations to understand. There are so many rules and so many intricacies that I think the average deer or elk hunter that just wants to go out with his kids and have a fun weekend will have no idea that he has the opportunity to pick up that tag. So I wonder where we're being encouraged to do it, if we're doing anything to advertise the availability of this opportunity outside of the Cougar rulebook.
We have done some press releases, Braden, but honestly, I think I can work with our outreach section and see if maybe there's some way we could reach out to big game hunters specifically and just let them know that's a possibility as well. We'd like to see people take advantage of the opportunity if they're interested and want to. So I'll touch base with them, and as we work through the guide book process, we could work on. So I know that hunt is open, so I'll talk with them this week and see if maybe there's something we can put out there in the public.
Yeah, it just seems to me like it'd be a great opportunity for the division to work with the average sportsman. So, you know, we got a lot of feedback that everyone's concerned about the deer herds and they want to see something done. And I think if the average sportsman understood, you know, here's something the division's offered as a tool, we're going to have very low harvest. But I think the publicity of it is a real positive if people were aware of it.
Yeah, I'll make some phone calls, Braden. I think that's a good suggestion to find, maybe use some other venues to reach out.
Darren, this is Austin again with another question. How do the spot and stock kills or harvest play into the quotas on the units they're taking on? Can you explain that to me a little?
They won't count right now. So if we saw a unit that had pretty high harvest, we're not anticipating high harvest on this permit. And so we're not going to count them towards the annual quota. So for example, if someone took a lion during the archery or mule deer rifle season or something, that wouldn't count. The quota would remain the same until the season opened for hounds in November. We'll look at all that stuff after the whole season's over and when we make recommendations next year. And I think, you know, if we saw a particularly high harvest, that might enter into the same way we'd look at wildlife services take, for example, if they took a lot of lions off a unit. But we're not recommending those count towards quotas. Biologists will look at those as the stats roll in.
Okay, and just to clarify, you could have a spot and stock tag in your pocket. You could have a split unit, a limited objective tag. If a person was in the field and happened to see a lion without the aid of his dogs, he could take that, put his spot and stock permit on it, and continue hunting limited objective.
Right. Yeah. The only restriction would be if you've got a spot and stock permit and no other permit in your pocket, you can't have dogs with you.
Right.
I know Marty's on. I don't know if Greg is, but my interpretation, if you had both tags, you could use dogs during the hound season. So beginning in November. But prior to that, even if you had a harvest objective tag, you couldn't use dogs until that season opens. That makes sense. It might be if you had a permit from the year before. Braden's right about the complications of some of this stuff, but you'd have to have the appropriate permit to use the appropriate equipment, just like you would for any other season, including dogs.
So for the predator management plan units that have unlimited quotas, was that just a blanket across the board unlimited? Or when you look at like the female target objectives and the greater than 5-year objectives, you know, some of these, it seems, we're taking more than 40 and or you're under that age goal that, you know, the percentage for greater than 5 years old. So it seems those are indicators that, you know, you're possibly doing harm to the population there and not just managing it.
Yep. Predator management plan, the objective of those plans is to reduce predator densities. And so on units that are under predator management, you do want to see high female harvest and relatively low ages. But you also need to know as a biologist, you know, when you've met your objectives. And so we'll be looking at the available deer data that we have to assess when we've met. The objective isn't to eliminate all predators, but it is to try to strike more of a balance between what we're seeing with prey numbers and the predator numbers on the unit. And so predator managements are a tool to get in to aggressively decrease those densities over a short period of time, and then get back under the plan once we've met those objectives. We see in the deer herd, we should see cause-specific mortality start to drop. And on some of these units where we've seen this high harvest even before this year, we are starting to see some responses where those are concerned. So that's the objective.
Is there any idea of, right now I see 24 units on that list. Is there any indication if any of those are going to drop off or any more are going to be added?
We'll
Till the end of the year to find out.
Yeah, what we'll do, we'll evaluate those twice a year. And so we'll look at these numbers again. We'll look at harvest next spring, but we'll get some deer numbers in December when we fly and do some collars and do some body condition assessment. So we'll do that in December, and then we'll look again in June after the winter to see what kind of winter we've had and what kind of concerns we have there. And so plans will be evaluated twice a year. And if the plans have accomplished their goal or they're not effective, then they'll be removed and be put back under the management plan sidebars. That's the intent.
Thank you. I think we've had some really good questions. Let me just kind of wrap this up, but pause for one more minute, see if anyone else has any additional questions before we move on. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin so he can show us the results of the comments coming in, and then we'll go into comments.
Thank you, Braden. On this agenda item, the results were somewhat surprising. We had 27% of the people that commented supported the proposal, 4% were neutral, and 70% were opposed to the recommendations. And there were a variety of reasons. I read through all of the comments and can give you some ideas of where people were coming from, but I think everybody else had an opportunity to read those comments as well.
Thanks, Kevin. I thought it was interesting on the opposed because the opposed seemed to be all over the board. The reasons for being opposed were not, it wasn't a consensus. You know, it was a broad spectrum of reasons for being opposed. So kind of a little difficult to analyze the opposition or the reason for that. Let's go ahead and go into the comments section, and we'll do this by roll call, and we're going to start bottom up this time. So Verlin, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I've got some comments. So our Cougar plan is what's this time got us into this problem of having in a lot of these areas around that there's a lot of cougars. And I think part of it relates to everybody wanting to take a trophy and they don't want to kill a female. They want to kill a young one. They want a big tom. So when you're planning and trying to manage these cougars, you really can't, because there's so many other things that are playing in. Basically, the houndsmen, the ones they want to kill, they want to kill the trophies. And that's why I think in some of these areas where you're trying to get the numbers down, that we need to look at the fur-bearer part of your regulations and sell some cougar tags to the fur bearers. Their traps are they don't care whether it's a big one or a little one, and they're there to take the pelt and get whatever money they can out of it. And so I think we're missing a big opportunity to take some of these numbers down that you're not going to get by just relying on houndsmen and people that buy these tags. Thanks.
Thanks, Verlin. Appreciate the comment. Sean, do you have any comments?
I don't have any comments.
Craig?
I'm just concerned about the number of cougars and both infecting the deer and infecting the particularly the sheepmen, and I think we need to work on getting the numbers down, and particularly some of those areas just to comment on the comments, I think all the comments I read, most of the people that were opposed had an alternative agenda as to what the reason they opposed it. So that's my comments.
Thanks, Craig. Dan, do you have any comments?
No comments.
Thanks, Dan. Tammy?
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Braden, and there really isn't a consensus or a consistency in the opposition. I didn't really see any of the plans or alternatives offered that made a lot of sense to me. I, agree with Verlin and Craig. You've got those pockets that we need to focus on where the hard part is, and where the hard hits and your big populations are. So I think I like the opportunity of spot and stock possibly, and I also like Verlin's idea on offering it up as a fur bearer, in some of these places where the problem cats are. That's all I got.
Thanks, Tammy. Chad?
Just a short comment. From our past RACs, it seems like there are multiple tools available to control the cougar population, especially ones that are problematic. And I don't know if a fur bearer is another tool that you can use or not, but it seems like it should be a possibility if that's if that's a concern on the unit. I guess there. Thanks.
Thanks, Chad. Gene?
I'm not sure where I am on this war on cougars that has suddenly come up because we came up with all of a sudden shortage of deer. I'm not sure how well documented the cougar problem is, but I think that the houndsmen are what determines the cougar harvest in Utah. And if there is that big a problem, spot and stock isn't going to take care of it. You're going to have to convince houndsmen to take more cats, because that's the only way you're going to really have any influence on taking cats.
Thanks, Gene. Bart?
It seems from some of my reading that I've done preparation for previous RACs and some of this RAC that it is hard to parse out is it weather or is it predators, what is the cause of impacted deer herds, and this proposal just seems to say it's only predators. That's the problem, nothing else. And I saw, it was interesting. I agree with everybody, the people who said that it was all over the map, why people didn't like it. It's if lions are a problem in units, maybe these are the right solutions, increasing the tags to 2, but then people who were against it were because they wanted more trophy toms, and which it was kind of, I didn't expect the people to be against it that were against it. And I think my biggest concern goes back to just predator management plans in the first place, which isn't what we're doing here. And, trying to parse out, weather effects and weather impacts on the mule deer populations vice cougars. So that's kind of where my concern is at. And I know this isn't the place to make that heard.
I guess my comment real quick, Bart, is I don't know that it's not the place to make that heard, but it's probably not the, it's already passed, so it may not be the place for a motion, but I think part of the process is to be heard, and that's why you're on the RAC. So yeah, we appreciate your input.
Okay. Thanks.
Austin.
Yeah, I have a few comments. First of all, I want to address the survey that was sent out. And I'm not sure how long we're going to be in this COVID-19 meeting electronically format, but I would strongly suggest that we advise, or someone advises the division, that we need to put out a better survey to the public that's more defined on this topic. Simply asking if you're supportive, neutral, or opposed. Obviously, we've seen what that does. It makes totally irreliable numbers on the votes. And then we have to read through the comments where some groups or individuals will address certain changes or recommendations, and then other groups won't say anything. And I know I brought this up before at RAC meetings, but I would like to see recommendations that are specific changes be broken out as their own questions on the survey, with the option to add comments on that question. I would have loved to seen, the spot and stock influence, be separated, where they could write their comments about that, or any of the changes be separated so we could tell. I mean, we had comments that came in from, I'll say, special interest groups out of state that blatantly opposed all cougar hunting, falling into the same bracket as a houndsman that only opposes one line of the recommendation. And his comment comes through, the same way. If we were meeting in person, I'm confident that that would have been cleared up. But meeting electronically, we need more detailed survey questions. If that can't come from the division, maybe we need someone else in a research facility to help us phrase that survey. But I would like to go on the record saying we need a better questions so that we know how to make these decisions. The second portion I would like to address in my comments is kind of what Braden alluded to, that we are in need of a simplification as far as the Cougar guidebook goes and the Cougar seasons and recommendations. Just the recommendations here add a few more season dates, if you will, to the mix. And I know all of us are educated and experienced, and I find myself struggling to understand what tag I need and which dates to follow. And I imagine many hunters will fall into the same thing and therefore elect not to buy a permit or not to participate in the hunt, because we're mixing calendar years with harvest objective years and now bag limit years starting July 1st. And then certain units like the Dutton have additional dates they must follow. So I don't know if it's possible by the expiration of this Cougar plan in 2025 to get a simplification done and just redo the whole season structure, but I think that should be considered as well. My last comment addresses the no pursuit for Cougar on the LaSalle, San Juan, and Book Cliffs East. The comments I received were that houndsmen and those that participate in that is not a supported decision to change that and to restrict those pursuit guys out there in the spring. So I would not be in support of accepting that recommendation. And personally, we would like to not see the collared lion regulation even be an option for the division to enforce that if they desire to. I think we leave it how it is. We highly recommend and require the identification course before you go, but do not make it illegal to harvest a collared lion. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin. I had a couple comments, and the one comment I did want to discuss, Austin hit on it also, but the recommendation of having a limiting the pursuit season on San Juan, LaSalle, and Book Cliffs. It seems to me that we're passing a rule on top of a rule. I think we've addressed the majority of the problem with the bear the change in the bear. I just think limiting pursuit of cougars in the summer is going to have, there's going to be very few people up there doing it. I understand some of those people may illegally pursue bears. That's already illegal. I think we're doing a couple things there. One, we're just having subsections of laws that it gets so complicated and so hard to understand instead of trying to make it uniform across the state. I also think we're limiting a opportunity that doesn't need to be limited. I'm always opposed to that. And I'm always opposed to rules on top of rules. If someone's going to break the rule, I don't know that adding another rule to it is going to stop them. So I would really like to see that one just aligned with the rest of the state. And actually, I think my other comments have been stated. I think it's been some good discussion, so I'd probably leave it at that. That's probably my primary concern. So let me just pause here again. Again, in this format, it is hard to get the conversation and the comments that we have in a live RAC. We did do a roll call so everyone would have an opportunity to have a voice, but I do want to just open it up again. The reason we meet is to discuss the issues, and the reason we meet is to voice our opinions. So I don't want to limit that. So I'm going to open it up if people want to jump in with any additional comments.
I've got a question, and that is for what you did, for you, Braden, actually, for what you just said. And I don't understand how we're making a rule on top of a rule. And I probably my confusion and not in what you said.
So and I would like to hear Darren's input on it, but here would be my take on what I'm saying there, Chad, is what we're trying to do is we're trying to stop some bad behavior, and that bad behavior is already regulated. And so what we're doing is we're trying to make it more difficult to behave badly, but we already have rules in place to stop the bad behavior. And so we're passing a rule on top of a rule to stop it. Also, I guess the other comment there is, you know, the problem really occurs when there is the original problem occurred because of a high density of houndsmen and dogs in these units. Well, when we get into the summer months that we're limiting here, that density goes away. That density is really in the spring. And so I feel like we're overreacting to the problem. I think the problem has been adequately addressed in the rules, in the changes we made to the bears. I don't think it needs made to the cougars. That's just my thoughts.
All right. And
I think that's a fair assessment, Ray. Sorry, Chad, didn't mean to step on you. Go ahead.
So Darren, my understanding is you were saying this was an enforcement issue. Are you just making the rule so that it's easier to enforce, so that if you're...
We didn't hear you when you tried to make a comment. I saw you flash up.
Can you hear me now?
I could hear him, Kevin. Yeah.
Okay. It seemed like I heard you say it was an enforcement issue from your law enforcement officers. And it kind of makes sense to me if that's the issue. They're saying, look, if anybody's on that unit with hounds during those months, then it's illegal. Then it's easy to enforce. As opposed to, hey, we've got some people up there with hounds, and now we can't tell what they're pursuing unless we follow them. Is that kind of what you're saying? Because I could see how that would be very difficult to enforce.
That was the concern, Chad, is people's, our officers see people with dogs rigged, but unless you follow them to the tree, you don't know. And again, this is primarily a non-resident issue. Those units already had fall restrictions to limit the use of dogs during some of those limited entry big game seasons. We didn't want big game hunters, and so what this does is incorporates those fall restrictions with a restriction in the spring that basically allows people that they're there with bear tags to continue to hunt with dogs. And that's mostly going to impact non-resident hunters, which has been represented as the primary concern. So what law is telling me is that they're seeing a lot of non-residents coming in with lion tags, hunting lions during not a super optimal time of year, and they'd have to prove that they're there actually chasing bears. and this way makes it a little bit easier. But I agree with Braden. I'm all for simplicity. You know, the more we can clean this up and make things easier, I'm all for it. So we have had some discussions about revisiting the plan. I think in light of the legislation, we probably need to relook at the plan overall and the whole strategy from top to bottom. And so, you know, that's something that's probably coming over the winter. But for now, this is where we are.
Thanks, Darren. Any other comments?
Yeah, this is Verlin. Hey, it looks to me like you are simplifying it. Your law enforcement don't have to follow the tree if they're there and they got the tag. Let them go. I mean, I'm all for that. I think we're spend more time making more rules and regulations that put a burden on the hunters in favor of the law enforcement. So I think it's a better deal.
I had a comment on the collared. I disagreed with what Austin said. I do think that you should have the flexibility to, make it, basically to restrict taking collared lions in certain units. I mean, it would have to go through the RAC process anyways to do that. So it doesn't seem you're really putting, it's not like you're trying to slip one by the RAC, and the people here as well. We'll be able to take a look at it and people will be able to provide comments at that time anyways. So I think it's a good rule. I think you should have that flexibility, and I support it.
Can I make a comment back there, Bart? This is Austin. Just kind of answer my thoughts on that collared take. With the addition, as Darren explained, of the spot and stock season, that anytime you create a regulation where it's only applies to certain units, if you have a hunter that's in the field and he has to question, was this a non-collared unit, or can I take a collared lion in this unit as he's moving around from elk unit to elk unit, or in his deer zone that may be broken up into separate cougar units, where it is a spot and stock and it's not sitting up in the tree above you, it may be hard to identify that cougar has, a collar indeed before you take a shot, which may be a long range shot. Now that we're talking a spot and stock season, it might not be up close and personal, sitting at a water hole or something like that. And those are my thoughts on why I would say let's just leave that out completely. We recommend not taking collars and we leave it at that.
My additional comment there too is we have some data showing that it's not a high take. People have done a good job of self-regulation. If people are doing a good job of self-regulation, my opinion is we let people continue down that path until they need to be regulated.
I would agree with that. This is Tammy. I agree with what Austin said, because and you too, Braden. I don't want to create a problem where, I think most people would completely hesitate or, stop and not take something that has a collar, but you're going to have those instances where, it is an accidental one or, not intentional. And I do not want people being penalized for that. That's a bad deal for anybody, in my opinion.
I know, but we're not saying they're going to be penalized. We're just giving DNR the option to do that, and they would have to go through this process anyways. And if a collared lion is a nuisance animal, it can still be removed through a depredation process. This is just putting controls. There is a dearth of data, and we want that data. That's why they're doing these studies. And I think it's important to protect that. And there maybe need to be an education process. Hunters, I'm not sure how that would be done. It doesn't seem like it would be that difficult. Again, as non-consumptive, I'm not a hunter, caveat. So obviously caveat that with everybody. But you know, if you're going out hunting, I'm sure you're aware of the few units you're going to be, you know, walking around in or driving around in, and you can check to see if it's illegal or not to take a collared lion in those units. Again, this isn't creating any new restrictions. It's just it's giving a tool to the agency, which I think is important.
Darren, I have a question on this. On the spot and stock, are they required to take the orientation course for a spot and stock permit?
No, we haven't required it. They do have to turn the animal in, bring it in, have it sealed. But for this emergency hunt, we haven't required an education course. No.
So let me be clear here. I don't want to require the course or the spot and stock, but I do think there's an opportunity to what Bart said, just help educate people that the reason those collars are there to provide really good data, and the reason we're doing what we're doing is because of good data. So, you know, I think that's a really good point. We already have low take on collared animals. And if we provided more education of the importance of those collars, we'd probably even lower that take. You know, it hasn't been an issue, and there may be opportunity just through some simple education to even lower it.
Yeah, philosophically, Braden, that's where I am. I in most cases, again, this language just allows the option, but I don't want to put someone in that situation. It would have to be some compelling reason, and we'd make those justifications through the public process. But I think 9 times out of 10, it's not necessary. So again, just it gives us the option, but we're not recommending using it at this time.
Any additional comments? All right, at this time, I'd entertain a motion. Oh, yeah, let me actually turn it over to Kevin so he can summarize the comments. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you. I appreciate that discussion that everybody had. Let me just kind of run through the comments that we heard so you can have them fresh on your mind as you contemplate a motion. Austin made a recommendation. This isn't specific to the Cougar, to this agenda item, but I think it's an important comment. I know there's people here that are, Stacy and others that are listening, that I think this is good feedback. There's a need to refine the way we are soliciting comments so that we can get specific feedback on the specific changes to the overall recommendations, rather than just forcing people to either support or oppose the overall recommendation. And I think if we continue in this paradigm longer of doing meetings this way, that's probably something that we'll need to look into. Austin also made a comment that Cougar regulations need to be simplified, and then voiced his opposition to the limitations on hound hunting on the LaSalle, San Juan, and Book Cliffs. Bart voiced concerns that we're focusing on predators when there are multiple factors affecting populations, that maybe we're fixating a little too much on just one part of the equation. Gene made maybe the most honest comment that I've heard in a RAC process, where he says he's not sure where he stands on the war on cougars. Appreciate that, Gene. Braden commented on the restrictions on the LaSalle, the San Juan, and the Book Cliffs, that they're redundant with other regulations. And we had a good back and forth on the taking of collared cougars. I'm glad that we have differing opinions on the RAC. Otherwise, this would be a pointless exercise. And so it's good to hear that back and forth, and people being able to share differing opinions. Tammy just talked about the need to focus on those small pockets where there's high impacts, and it supported Verlin's idea to allow trapping of lions in certain incidents. Craig made similar comments, concern about cougar impacts on deer and on domestic sheep. And then again, Verlin made the case that we need to allow trapping in certain areas where we're trying to reduce the cougar population in a timely manner. So that's what I got from the comments. I hope I didn't misrepresent anybody.
Thanks, Kevin. So we'll entertain a motion now. In my opinion, the easiest way to do this is to make some motions to address changes you want to make, and then after those motions to accept the remaining of the plan as presented. But there's multiple ways that you can do this, and they're correct. So however you guys want to make a motion, but we'd entertain a motion at this time.
Braden, this is Austin. I'll make a small motion about one portion. I make a motion that we reject the shortened pursuit only season on the LaSalle, San Juan, and Book Cliffs East units.
Thanks. So Austin's made a motion to reject the shortened season, the amendment that the RAC presented on the San Juan, LaSalle, and Book Cliffs unit. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
So we have a second by Gene. Any additional discussion?
So is this a take, tag, or pursuit only?
This would be for the take. It's a predator management area. In two of those, or all three.
It could be either. It could be. It's a little complicated because these units had a different season structure before, and so I guess it helped to know if you wanted to go back to what it was last year, or if you want it to mirror the seasons across the state, recognizing that will put dogs potentially on the ground during limited entry elk seasons. But yeah, people could be out pursuing or hunting lions without these restrictions.
So Braden, should I clarify
true,
my motion?
Yeah, maybe clarify your motion, but let me add a quick comment. I think that's true that people could be out pursuing those seasons, but what we've seen is that's a problem with bear hunters. It would be a very limited number that would be out pursuing with cougars. So I think it is a problem in regards to bears. I don't see that as a problem regarding cougars. Go ahead, Austin.
Do I need to restate that motion? Is that how I would amend that?
So Austin, let me tell you how I've got it recorded. And then if you want to clarify it, I'll just make any clarifications. But the motion is to reject the restrictions to pursuit on the San Juan, LaSalle, and Book Cliffs. And I think Darren's question for clarification is that to reject those restrictions completely, or just the new one so that it goes back to what it was in previous years?
So I would say that it rejects all restrictions from the pursuit season, so it would match the regular pursuit season dates and end May 31st, and it would not restrict anything to end April 15th for the harvest objective or unlimited seasons.
So the pursuit on those units would match all other units.
Yes.
I think that's the easiest way to say it, is it would match the rest of the state. So it wouldn't be just match all the other units. Do we need to, I think that's just some clarity. I don't think we need a new motion, do we? I think we're good. And we have a second on it. Any additional discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. We have a motion and a second, so I will do a roll call. And again, just clearly state a yes or a no. So Austin.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Gene. I think we lost Gene.
Yep.
Chad.
No.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
And Berlin.
Yes.
Do we have Gene back or is he off? Okay, let me go. Chad, you go to no. Would you like to clarify your reason for a no vote?
No, I'm just good leaving it with a no. I can.
Okay, that's fine.
You can tell he's an attorney.
Thanks, Chad. The motion passes 7 yes, 1 no, correct? All right. Do we have any other motions?
We'd like, I'd make one to go along with what Verlin was saying about opportunity to trap, particularly in those areas where we're not able to kill the amount of lions that we need to. So I'll make a motion to be able to trap cougars.
Okay. Do we have a second? So Craig's made a motion that we have an opportunity to trap cougars, and Verlin seconded that motion. Any additional discussion on that?
And just to confirm, this is Austin. This is recreational trapping. We're making a motion for someone to look at that, or what would be the next step there?
It wouldn't be recreational. It'd be Furbearer.
So we currently have, the division currently has the option to use government trappers or even division personnel to use traps, or we could authorize private landowners. If you want to make it legal to trap cougars for the general public, that would help if you could clarify exactly what you're asking for us, just so I know. So I'm clear.
Craig, I believe your intent is that it would be for the general public, but if you could just add that clarity.
Yeah, that is my idea on that. Yes.
Could you restate that?
So let me tell you how I have it recorded, and Craig, you tell me if you agree that the motion is to allow trapping as a legal method of take for cougars.
Yeah, by just regular trappers, not government, not just government or DWR people. So, yeah.
For the public, how about that?
Yeah.
So allow trapping as a legal method of take for cougars by the public.
Okay.
And Verlin, you're seconding that?
Yes.
Any discussion?
So wasn't the original concern for extending it to fur bearers really about targeting high density cougar populations and not just in general at all units? So is that what you were focusing on? That's what I thought what you said, but now it's changed to everything.
So I'm not leading this discussion. I'm just joining.
No, I'm saying,
I just wanted to make a comment joining the discussion.
Yeah. So when this comment was first raised up earlier in our meeting, it was brought up because there were high density predator populations in certain units, and it didn't seem that stalk and shoot, or whatever that right term is, was going to be an effective way to actually control the populations. And so if we're actually trying to control the populations, could you extend, could you let the fur bearers, have a take in it, or be able to basically trap them? But now we're saying that we just want to let it be done in every unit.
Here would be my thought on this. My discussion is it's not saying that we'd want to do it in every unit. It's that we would allow it as another tool the division could use, and then they would determine the units to put this in. Currently, it's not an option. And so this would simply open it up that the division could use this tool, and they would bring it forward to where to use it, or the wildlife board would make the recommendation of where to use the tool. Again, we don't make any changes here. We simply are offering our recommendations to the board. So, but that's how I would look at, or that would be my thought on this, is we're just asking to open this up so the division could use this if they decide to.
Yeah, I think you've summed it up good, Raiden, for me. So,
If the motion would read like that, that's something I could support, but it's just a general statement that it'd be open to the general public seems too broad.
We have these predator management areas now, and so we could include that wording in the motion, and that would.
Okay, so what if you did allow trapping as a legal method of take for cougars by the public on predator management units? Would that add some comfort to that?
I'm good with that if Verlin is, so.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, I think that's some good clarification. Any more discussion on that?
I would agree with that too, but I still think we need to have Kevin read that back to us.
It's what he has. Yeah, let's have Kevin read. What he has written is what I read.
Yeah, so Braden and I are looking at the same screen. So it essentially says allow trapping as a legal method of take for cougars by the public on predator management units or units that are under predator management plans.
Braden, can I ask a question on that? For Darren, what does that look like? As I'm not familiar with other states that neighbor us as far as trapping regulations for cougars, but is this way out in left field? What does that look like? Would the houndsman support something like that? Could Darren address that real quick?
I think Nevada still allows trapping. I think they're the only other Western state where it's legal. We'd probably need to address take of kittens. Right now it's illegal, so if someone traps a kitten and it dies, then we'll have to figure out how to deal with that. But other than that, I think we can work through it depending on what the RAC wants to recommend.
Well, I'm just going to say, aren't the traps set for a cougar? They're not going to, the kittens are going to be able to get out of those, aren't they normally? If I'm familiar with the right kind of traps for cougars.
Yeah, people catch cougars, adult cougars now in traps.
Right.
Try to release them. They're not always able to get out of them. And kittens would be similar to Bobcat. So I think we just need to take that into account and just realize that with trapping, you're likely to catch whatever is out there. And we probably ought to consider.
Just to call, I mean, you do still have the check. You have to check your traps in a certain time limit, and that's to address that. But
yeah, you still have to comply with the trapping rule. And
two comments on that. First, there were on units where we were trying to reduce the number of cats anyway. And the other just comments, I do know of people who've chased cougars who have caught cougars that have had part of their paw taken off by a trap. So they have been trapped before.
I mean, I have a general comment, from the non-consumptive perspective, this is a bit of a poison pill for the entire proposal. I mean, I can't think of a single non-consumptive person out there who I've ever spoken with that would support me voting for this. Which doesn't matter. I'm just one here. But, the general consensus in a lot of the population, when you start talking about trapping, it's brutal. It's not something people like to do, and it is going to be a PR nightmare when this goes forward. So understanding that may not make a difference to people here, but it will become a PR nightmare. And I don't think it's the right thing to do.
It might be worth pointing out too. It could impact trapping more generally if if this is something that people are strongly opposed to. There may be repercussions there too. It's the trend in the West has been to go away from trapping cougars, Mainly, just informationally, just so everybody's kind of aware of what's been going on.
I'll make a comment real quick, Braden. This is Austin. I'm all for sportsmen having the opportunity to take animals wherever possible. And, the term government employee or government trapper is often not super invited in the sportsman world. But I would say that I agree with Bart. I don't want to give any ammunition at this time to anti-hunting groups, conservation groups. I'm very familiar with what happened in Arizona, where a group came in recently around these same terms and almost had all cat hunts shut down in the state by legislation, getting it on the ballot box. And so as far away that we can keep hunting, especially predator hunting, from the ballot, I'm in favor of that, especially as Utah changes, evolves, and receives more residents. That's my comment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Jordan.
So we've got to manage these cougars some way. And what we're doing now is not working. That's the bottom line. The houndsmen, these tags you're selling, they're not taking enough cougars. They're not, if, Darren talked about, you have these hunts where you hunt for a while, and then if you don't get your quota, then you hunt a little longer. It's a problem, and with this trapping, it's a way of taking non-discriminate age, and the houndsman's one part of it. The trappers are just as much involved. They need to have a way to make money. A couple of RACs ago, we didn't go with a motion because we didn't want to seem like we were that crazy southern region. Well, within the month, it went to the legislature, and the legislature did what we talked about, and it's the same thing. It's the deer herd going downhill. It's the predator problem that we have in the state of Utah right now. And they took it to the legislature, and it had to be done there. And they did basically what the motion was that died in this RAC. So sometimes you got to bite the bullet. And I have faith in our legislature right now that they'll realize what we're talking about and what's going on. I don't think we should run from what we know the public opinion is going to be. We're outmanned by John Q. Public, but most of us here have boots on the ground. We know what's going on. And I'm from agriculture, but I'm also an elk hunter and a deer hunter. And it disturbs me that I don't have 50 head of deer out in my field right now. I may have 4 if I go out at midnight with a spotlight. And I've got dead deer carcasses all over these foothills around my house from lion kill. So, we can do what we can avoid getting beat up by the public, or we can do what's right.
Okay, I think we've had good discussion on this, but I think we've got a motion, we've got a second. I think it's time to call for a vote on this one. So, Austin.
No.
Bart.
No.
Gene. Is Gene back?
No.
Okay, Chad.
No.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
No.
Craig.
Yes.
Sean,
No.
and Verlin.
Yes.
So the motion fails, 3 yeses and 6 noes. Any other motions that want to be brought to the table? And if there are no motions, then we need a motion to accept or not accept, whatever the motion may be, the division's recommendations as presented. Let's do a motion to accept it, and if it gets voted down, we'll go there.
I'll make a motion to accept the plan as presented.
All right. Do we have a second on that? Well, we can't let this motion fail for a lack of a second. So somebody has to do something. Thanks, Bart. So we have a motion to accept the rest as presented by Chad and a second by Bart. We'll go in the same order. Austin. Oh, actually, I guess we need to have a discussion. I believe we've already had the discussion, but the process is any additional discussion on this motion? All right, let's go to vote. Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Craig.
Yeah.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we have one last item. It's a informational item, but we will have in this RAC, we'll take the opportunity to ask questions and comments on it. We won't have a vote on it. Before we move on to that, let me just make one comment. I want to kind of chime in on what Kevin said. I do appreciate the diversity of the RAC. I think that's the important part of the RAC. I appreciate the comments. I think there's some tough issues, particularly regarding cougars. That's a high visibility one, and we get more negative feedback on cougars than any other RACs. And so I do appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the different viewpoints. So I want to thank the RAC, and I want to thank everyone for voicing their opinions. So thank you. So the last item is the Beaver WMA Habitat Management Plan. Do we have any questions on that? Gary, you're on.
Yes, I'm here if there's any questions or comments.
Yes, Gary's present. Any questions on that?
Terry sat here for 2 hours, so please ask him a question to justify my paying him for being here for 2 hours.
I do have a question, Gary. As you're aware, I live right next to these management areas, and particularly the one right under the B. I've seen a lot of grazing, in my mind, grazing concerns on it. We have cattle on there frequently. They aren't supposed to be on there. I know that the general concern, I guess, maybe a tough or a bad question, but are we going to come up with ways to deal with that better? I think there's definitely an opportunity and a time to have some cattle through there, but to have that on there all winter, that's not the intent of this property. The intent of this property is a sanctuary for wildlife, not cattle.
Well, I guess a frank question back. I was never made aware that there was any on there this last winter. We have made a lot of efforts to secure the borders a lot better. We've done a lot with the gates, done a lot with fencing, and becoming aware of it will help us a lot. Anytime we are aware of a livestock trespass, we pursue it through the different avenues that are available through our law enforcement section, and generally we've been fairly successful at sorting those out. But the biggest thing is being aware of it. That property is a unique one, Braden. You know, SFW owns that, and so we have to partner with you in contacting anybody that's in livestock trespass. But we're happy to be partners in doing that. So I guess hearing that you feel like there was cattle on there all winter is a surprise to me. So
And I probably should clarify, I do think this winter was better. There were a couple occasions where there were a lot of cattle on there, and there's sign that there was a lot of cattle on there, but they weren't on there all winter. That's fair. I guess as I'm familiar with the 3 properties, that seems like the property that sees that much more than the other 3, maybe would be my comment. But
Yeah, and I would agree with that comment. It's got a long history of livestock trespassing. We've been working diligently year after year, improving a lot of things, and anything you can add to communication that helps us respond, we will help, and we will continue to do everything we can as well, when we're aware of it, especially.
and I know we've talked about that before, and it's
So let me make a comment real fast. I guess I'm off mute. I am also a livestock producer and whatever, and being the county commissioner from Beaver County, if that is private property, we have a fence out rule in Beaver County. So ultimately it's the property owner's responsibility to maintain the fences and keep those up. So I don't know if you've got gates down or the fences are down or what, but that might be something, I know that I don't know that for a fact. We talked about that today with Gary on the roads, and that there really isn't roads through there. So there shouldn't be ATV access or that kind of stuff.
no, on this one, Cammie, on this one, there are roads through it. In fact, there's quite a few roads on the one I'm talking about. It's on that main road that heads up to the B. I am familiar with your comment of it's a fence out state, and that's part of the concern and problem. But there are quite a few roads through this one.
And quite frankly, I think our issue on this one is that we've been dealing with an individual that is willing to open those gates. And so the steps we took in addition to what we've done historically in previous years is we actually locked those gates this last winter. And that's why I was hopeful that things went a little better.
I found, and now I want to say it was last winter, but I found a situation where the fence had been cut too. So in my opinion, it's intentional trespass, which I understand it's a fence out state, but when it's an intentional trespass, that's challenging.
Totally agree there. And that's something that can be dealt with law enforcement on both sides.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's an issue statewide, countywide. Dan can attest to that, with all of our BLM fences. We've got a lot of hunters and ATVers and whatever else that are always dragging a deer out the bottom of a draw through, cut your fence and don't bother to put it back. So
yeah, I've seen that fence left down plenty of times by people up there spotlighting deer too. So
right, yeah. So good luck with that.
Tammy and Braden, I will say that in almost all cases where we have, especially chronic trespass, we always get the county sheriff involved, and that's usually pretty helpful to shut that down.
Yeah, they'd be the right one to call, I would think.
We kind of got distracted on comments. Let's jump back to questions. Any questions? Because I do have another comment on this one, but any questions?
I've got a question. You say there's several roads through it. Is there cattle guards or gates?
Yes. Well, some of both.
Yeah, some of both, definitely.
Now, I probably have better luck with cattle guards because there's a lot of people that won't close the gate, and then when someone like myself comes along and sees the gate open, I close the gate if the gate's closed. I leave it open if it's open.
Yeah, that's a very good and fair comment. And that the main roads that go through this specific property are the ones that have the cattle guards, and the ones that are gated are roads that are either seasonally closed or closed altogether, and we're working toward having them hopefully disappear anyway.
Other questions? Let's jump into comments. I guess just a quick comment from me, Gary. I appreciated the presentation. I thought it was very well done. Again, 2 of these properties are very close to my home. The other 2 are also pretty close. And I thought the presentation was well done. Appreciate it.
I would agree. While my mic is still on open. Gary presented this at commission meeting today as well, so he's probably tired of looking at my face, but I think he did a good job.
We appreciate you guys, just the partnership of Beaver County, the partnership of all the residents up there. Beaver is a good place to work with people, and we enjoy everything we do up there. And having some really good properties, even the ones that are semi-contentious, the neighbors are good neighbors, and they have their own interests, but they've been very good to say, I recognize they're my interests, and you have your interest in the property, and we come to good conclusions together, and I appreciate that.
Any additional comments? Again, this isn't an action item, so there'll be no motion or vote, but any additional comments? All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You got it.
We have a motion of you got it. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Austin, let's do a roll call.
Yes, thank you.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Hey, appreciate it. Thank you everyone for being here, and appreciate your time and comments, and we'll see you next time. Last time I had high hopes that we'd be in person. This time my hopes are not nearly as high. We'll see what happens. Thanks everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.